All right, with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can we just confirm that Director Kelly is now on the Zoom as a presenter?
I am here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. With that, let's go ahead and begin with a roll call of members present and also a teleconference disclosure. So Director Kelly, would you like to make the announcement or will we have staff do that?
Pursuant to the provisions in the Brown Act, I am attending today remotely under the Just Cause provisions due to medical necessity, and there is no one over the age of 18 in the room with me today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Kelly. So with that, let's go ahead and do a roll call of members present.
All right. Director Cater Thompson? Here. Director Corsi? Here. Director Harvey?
Here.
Director Giudice? Here. Director Hinton?
Here.
Director Kelly? Vice Chair Kelly?
Here.
Director Lands?
Here.
Director Leap?
Here.
Director Lowe?
Oh, she's absent.
Right, thank you. Director Okrepke? Director Rabbit?
Here.
And Chair Hopkins?
Present. And with that, we will move on to public comment on items not on the regular agenda. Would anyone in person wish to make public comment?
You noted here.
She was absent. It's Andrew Lowe, but the alternate is present.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Great point. So I think that while Director Lowe was called, Director Farrar Rivas is taking her place as alternate. So I just want to note that for the record.
Excellent. Thank
I
you.
get so used to seeing you at Sonoma Clean Power that I'm like, you know, different meeting. So with that, I believe that we now have acknowledged everyone present in the room and we can move on to, as well as remotely attending, and we can move on to public comment on matters not on the regular agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board of Directors. Seeing no one rise in person, is there anyone online?
I do not see anyone wishing to give a public comment. Chair Hopkins.
Great. With that, we will go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. Is there anyone who wishes to pull any item from consent? Seeing none, I will ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment on the consent calendar today, which is items 4.1 through 4.5. Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to comment on the consent calendar?
No, Madam Chair.
With that, I will bring it back to the board for a motion.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion from Director Giudice and a second from Director Harvey. With that, because we do have one remote board member, we will go ahead and take a roll call vote on the consent calendar today.
City of Petaluma?
Yes.
Apologies. Director Corsi?
Yes.
Director Harvey?
Yes.
Director Giudice?
Yes.
Director Hinton?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Director Lands?
Yes.
Director Leap?
Yes.
For Director Lowe,
Director Farrar
Director Farrar Rivas?
Here.
Or is that an aye?
It's yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Director
right?
Okrepke?
that wasn't,
And let's see, Director Rabbit?
Aye.
And Chair Hopkins.
yes.
Thank you.
That motion carries. And with that, we will go ahead and move on to item 5.1, which is a very bittersweet one. And yet I will say that it is sweet because as I was walking by Drew's former office, I was like, oh, I don't get to see his bright and shining and joyful and amazing self today. And yet I do, because you are here today to receive a resolution of commendation. And so I am wondering if you would mind just coming up and sharing a few words with us.
What to say? What to say? I'm humbled and privileged to have served in this capacity for the past 8.5 years. When I walked into Suite 206 of 490, you're a typical 26-year-old, super unsure about the world, thought I was going to go back into the world and teach English and save everyone from everything, super insecure. But now I'm walking into my new role, my unapologetic, my authentic self, excuse me. It's not often that you see me at a podium. Usually I am behind the screen. I realized real quickly how important this field is to me and the type of work that I'm supposed to do, and that's this. From voting on Measure Q right at 18, to using Santa Rosa City Bus's Route 19 to shuttle myself from Southwest Santa Rosa to the junior college, to learning how to drive during the expansion in Rohnert Park on 101. Yes, my trucker father was a great teacher. And now I get to see the completion of Highway 101. Thank you, James. My commute will get much better. So over the past 8 years, I saw passenger rail service come online, transit integration really become an important and talked about concept. Highway 101, more attention to climate action and the establishment of climate action advisory committees countywide. And transitioning to the sudden virtual environment that 2020 brought us, and then developing the hybrid environment that we are in now. An avenue that wasn't previously there, that opened up more participation. SCTCA truly is a great shop to be at. And I say that because on my first day here, Director Corsi, when he was the representative from Santa Rosa, had said Suzanne runs a great shop. James and Suzanne run a great shop. I wouldn't be standing here today without the support I've received from my colleagues. Colleagues who took the time to listen to my questions when I needed my perspective challenged or thoughts understood, or to nerd out on my transit adventures. Thank you, Dana. I'm also thankful to the dedicated board that has come and shown up every month, whose questions have kept me curious and have inspired me, and to the advocates who had reminded me of their perspectives as well. I am truly blessed. I am also very thankful to the leadership of James. His dedication and mission to SCTA is unparalleled, and I need to get some of that energy. And for his confidence in me in developing this position to what it is now, and to have that freedom to entertain ideas, to try something new. We really do have great bosses here. And so I'm to close just to the next clerk who will come after me. Ross is doing a great job. I watched last month's video. The building's still standing. We're good. All is good. You know, y'all didn't need me as much as you thought you did. But to the next clerk who will serve here at SCTCA, I want to affirm that SCTCA is wholeheartedly authentic and dedicated. You will be welcomed, and know that staff is here to support you. And share your excitement with us. Dive on in, and when you've learned this job, please make it your own. And so with that, thank you. Thank you for everything. Chair Hopkins, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you in 2016. Have to acknowledge that. So thank you for taking that chance on me. And thank you to my colleagues. And I'm very excited to start this next chapter. Lots of good work. I'm not going anywhere. Suzanne's already requested a meeting, so.
Well, I'd like to bring it back to see if any of my colleagues would like to share anything. But I do want to say that I have known you for, I think, a decade now.
Just about. I'm rounding up, so yeah.
Round up.
We're gonna say a decade.
Yes. And what struck me immediately, I think the first time that I met you, was just your passion and your energy and your enthusiasm is absolutely contagious in the best of ways. And what I saw as you really grew into and owned the role, at this agency, is that you are also the human equivalent of glue, and that you create community where you go and you make things happen. And you just, you're just sort of like, I don't know, maybe I'll channel a super West County metaphor and say you're like the mycorrhizae between the, forest. Like you're connecting and you're communicating and you're bringing nutrients and you're making sure everybody has what they need to go forward. And that is a really, really beautiful gift. And I will miss your smile and just the way that you comport yourself, because it feels like every day is a good day, that you bring that energy, which can be, there are tough days in government, and your enthusiasm is boundless. And we are just so lucky, I think, to have had you. And MTC is extraordinarily lucky to steal you. And so I know that you're going to continue to do great things. And it's not bad having that connection, I will say, from someone who is a Sonoma County local over to MTC. So thank you so much for your service. And I would see if anyone else wants to say some things. Sounds like Supervisor Corsi, you were one of the early enthusiasm folks for Drew.
Yeah, Drew, I think I've also known you for an SCTA decade, however many years that is.
I like that.
But I just think of you as super calm, super friendly, super confident in what you do. Whenever, every meeting, you were the same. Every time something went wrong, you were the same as when things were going right. You talked about not being too sure of yourself when you started. That didn't last long. So congratulations on your new job. Look forward to seeing where you go. I'm sure this won't be your last promotion. I also want to say the first time I met you, you said, "Oh yeah, I used to read you in the newspaper when I was a kid."
When I was a teen. I willingly took summer school when I was probably 10th grade and at Santa Rosa High School, and I would walk to the library and I would unbundle the Press Democrat packages that were left, probably for the staff, because I wanted to read the newspaper. And Director Corsi's comment was the one I went for. So I wouldn't say a kid, more so a teen.
Well,
At this age, it's all the same, isn't it?
now I feel a whole SCTA decade older. So thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing it. I almost brought that up, but I was like, maybe not. So.
Okay.
Director Abbott?
Drew, thank you. I think, I don't know, it seems like I'm the oldest on every board. It's the third building I've been in on SCTA, but so the couple of SCTA decades. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for just being you and being a really good person. I think, your ability, your responsiveness, your professionalism, all the above was always stellar. And I always appreciate that, and always looked forward to seeing you when I came to the meeting, no matter where the building was. So thank you for that. Keep Andy in check, and I'm sure I'll run into you often in the city.
You know where to find me.
Yeah.
Director Kelly?
Drew, I just wanted to say I'm so sad to see you go, but delighted for your new role. And when we first met back in 2020, not a SCTA decade ago, but certainly in a different era when we were meeting remotely during COVID, you were so instrumental in making sure that we ran smoothly. And as we onboarded, you were just so incredible and welcoming, and made it feel possible to kind of do the impossible during the COVID era of trying to maintain those public meetings. So I just want to wish you all the best, and thank you for your time and energy and dedication into making these agencies and organization what it is today that we can, continue to move forward and be proud of. And that's thanks to your countless contributions and commitments. So thank you.
Director Giudice?
Thanks. Yeah, when I was first elected, got on SCTA, had some big shoes to fill, right, from Roanoke Park. And the learning curve for SCTA is pretty vertical, especially for a guy who had no transportation background whatsoever. And so I really appreciate it. Very kind, very helpful, very patient with me, a number of emails, et cetera. And I really appreciate it. And I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Director Hinton?
Drew, We haven't worked together as long, maybe as some of the people in the room, but I just remember when I was trying to always find parking and running over here and you're like, you can take my spot. We all move, and always offering information to us when we were new to make us feel part of it all. And so I really appreciate that. You definitely make me and everyone else feel welcome.
Director Harvey.
Well, Drew, I am so glad that you got your new job, although I will miss you terribly. You have always been so welcoming, and your attitude towards, well, what can I do for you to help make this board position better was always made me feel really, really good and know that there was someone behind me to help me. As Gerard said, it's a very steep learning curve, but you were always there to help along the way. So I wish you the best, but we'll miss you a lot.
Thank you.
Director Kader Thompson.
I just want to thank you for just for all you've done for so many years. And, we kind of go back a long ways, but then more recently, and I expect to see you around town.
Oh, you bet.
And now I just have to share something that just occurred at the executive committee, and I hope it's okay, Director Hinton, because it was through no fault of Director Hinton's own. She was late to the executive committee because the executive committee calendar invite showed as canceled, and then it rescheduled as of to start at 2 p.m. instead of 1:30. And so we all got a huge laugh because we're like, Drew leaves and everything goes straight to hell. So with that, on that note, is there anyone who would like to make a motion on the resolution for Drew Nichols today?
I'll make that motion.
A motion by Director Kader Thompson. Do we have a second? Second from Director Rabbit of 2 decades of SCTA fame. And could we please have a roll call vote on this one?
I do have one public comment.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. Yes. And does anyone from the public wish to comment in person? Seeing none, let's go to online.
All right, Mr. Letman, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. This is Rick Lutman. I'm the League of Women Voters appointee to the Citizens Advisory Committee to this body. So Drew has been the face of SCTA for those of us on the committee, the interface that we have with the committee. And he's always done a wonderful job. If he didn't, we'd notice it. And everything ran wonderfully smoothly. And Drew, we're sorry to see you go, but I certainly wish you, and I'm sure I speak for the whole of the CAC, all the best in your new positions in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And with that, we will go ahead and take the roll call vote on this item 5.1.
If I can say one more thing quickly, sorry
Please
to
do.
interrupt. Ross has been a huge rock for me. So you talk about how you don't know that I'm freaking out when things go sideways. It's because Ross balanced me out. To have him as my
I
support.
never saw
during
Drew
these
freak
meetings.
out once. Just as I will
Those,
never.
those moments were alive and well, and I really have to extend appreciation to Ross being that rock through these meetings when those moments happen. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, ready for the vote? Director Kader Thompson,
Yes.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Aye.
Director Hinton,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Hi.
Director Lands,
Aye.
Director Leap,
Aye.
Director Ferrar Rivas,
Aye.
Director Okrepke,
Aye.
Director Rabbit, and Chair Hopkins.
Yes. And with that, we would like to present you with a framed version of the resolution. And I'm wondering what the best way to take a picture. Maybe it's if we actually all stand around you. So you stay at the podium and then we all cluster around and see if someone could take a photo from this side. And then anyone else from the SCTA or SCTCA team, corrected myself, can come join in the photo as well. Does that work?
All right.
gonna kind of circle up. And someone can come, if we can get someone with a photo with a camera over there.
Yeah, I know. I want to get that monitor going for them.
Or I think we need a photo maybe to take from over there. Yeah. All right.
Oh, that's the timer. Sweet.
Okay. Let's got everybody, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll take another one because you're blinking. Okay, and then a silly one.
I think just make sure everything's really plugged in well.
Okay, I'm gonna buy you lunch.
Okay, everyone heard that.
Who's going to MCA?
Yeah, I couldn't make it. Oh, no, to Zero Waste, yeah, I was there. Oh, the eggplant was good.
He's amazing. I do think it was actually 2015, because that's really when the
I love
campaign
that
started.
plan.
He worked for my.
Good.
Good.
I like.
Yes.
Because I make it like my grandma made it. That's the recipe I use.
That's awesome. He's
And they
amazing.
will be presenting, and the clicker's up there, so it's plugged in, so
Right on,
it should
thank
be
you.
ready to go.
And with that, we're gonna go ahead and move
think we
on
could
to item
share
5.2,
this,
which is the presentation on the
share,
replacement of
click
gas
back and just make
taps.
sure
And
it's
so
in
I
line.
believe that our executive director,
Oh,
Cameron, is going to present this one via the Politico group.
All right, Drew, take the party outside. So our next item is 5.2. I would like to introduce Kiana Valentine from Politico Group. Also online, we'll promote our federal government affairs consultants, Kariakas and John. And kicking it off, if we could have our folks tee up a presentation
Yes,
for
He
Kiana.
is pulling that up as we speak.
Great. And so we're gonna talk about the gas tax. This is a standalone information item only before we get into our next advocacy item.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon. Had to remind myself what time it is on this Monday afternoon. Kiana Valentine, part of Politico Group. I've been before you as one of your legislative advocates in Sacramento. My partner, Chris Lee, will be doing the legislative update in a moment. And here I'm going to wear a different hat for purposes of this presentation, though. The firm also represents another organization in Sacramento, Transportation California, which is a labor management group that advocates for robust, sustainable transportation funding. For those of you around in 2017, they had a hand in the passage of SB1, which was the road user. I'm sorry, I'm getting my efforts mixed up already. The Road Accountability Act. I worked on that for 4 years of my life, and I'm having a blank moment. I'm going to blame it on too good of a Mother's Day yesterday. So, and also the defeat of Prop 6 in 2018. And there is an effort afoot right now to identify different funding tools to address what we have identified as the looming transportation funding crisis in front of us.
This way. I can also control the slide.
Next slide, please. Shall we do that?
Yeah.
It's on that. Showing this.
Okay. Great. So what is the looming transportation funding crisis? We have known for several decades that the increase in fuel efficiency of vehicles, as well as the transition to alternative fuel vehicles, while very good from a climate perspective, from an air quality perspective, and even a taxpayer perspective, because you're just, or a consumer perspective, you're just buying less fuel. One of the unintended consequences, though, is decreased transportation funding to maintain city streets, county roads, state highway systems. And this extends to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, as well as transit capital and operations funding, right? Because there's diesel funding involved in this as well. The California Transportation Commission recently released a report that says over the next 10 years, the state is likely to lose over $31 billion in funding, which is no small number, right? That's a pretty significant amount.
Come on, let's see another one.
Sorry, I'm not sure what you all are seeing and what.
Yeah, just hang on one second. Okay, there's the presentation.
Two.
Yeah, maybe we can go into presentation mode also, then we'd be able to see it a little bit better if that's possible.
BC, this is showing as your second monitor too, so maybe that's.
Just 1 minute while we sort out our technical difficulties. No pressure.
I was thinking I could maybe on a good day recall from memory the presentation. But I don't know if I'm.
No,
having
we'll
one of
get
those
there. There we
today.
go. Okay, perfect.
Slide back if you don't mind. One more. All right, thank you.
There we go.
Great, awesome. Third time, we're gonna nail it this time. Thank you. So there's a projection of a loss $31 billion over the next 10 years. That's just in state revenues. At the federal level, it's projected that gas tax receipts will drop by another $25 billion by 2035. For that $31 billion number, it's essentially the fiscal year we're in now through a 10-year time horizon. A lot of this is to be taken with a grain of sand, right? A grain of salt. What is happening at the federal level in terms of incentives and funding for building out electric vehicle charging infrastructure may impact consumer choices. The Advanced Clean Cars 2 mandate is in jeopardy under the current federal administration. However, on the other side of things, again, I guess to be influenced by the federal regulatory environment as well, we were 6 months ago looking like an electric vehicle could cost less than a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle by model year 27, 28, which is just around the corner. So there are a lot of different factors at play that could impact that $31 billion. It could be less, it could be more, it could be spot on. It could accelerate, it could take longer to achieve that loss. But this number has given us something to at least coalesce around in terms of thinking about what we want to do for the future of transportation funding. I always like to, especially when talking with city and county officials, let folks know that SB1 revenue, which goes directly to cities and counties for local street and roads maintenance, also supports competitive grant programs that SCTCA, RCPA. When do I get to use the combined acronym?
Go new, SCTCA. CTCA.
CTCA, okay. Sorry, where is it? SCTCA. Okay, thank you. Applies for trade corridor enhancement solutions for congested corridor active transportation. All of those are maintaining funding levels for now. But the gas tax increment is starting to decline. It's all the other registration fees included in that legislation that's sort of standing up overall transportation funding at the time. It's working. You did it. What? Either way. Okay. So about a year ago now, Transportation California Board of Directors said, well, what is the solution? Is it a road user charge where motorists pay per mile driven? As you may know, the state has been studying that for over a decade now. There's a technical advisory committee. There's been 3 or 4 different pilot programs. I don't know if anyone's participated in the pilot. I have. I participated in the very first one. But I'm not sure, I wasn't sure a year ago whether that was the right path for California, or if there was another option worthy of evaluation, right, for the state. And so we hired a consultant based out of Germany and New Zealand, New Road Consulting, that has done work all over the world on the future of transportation funding in other states and countries. And we asked them to develop a framework for us to take an evidence-based look at all of the different options in front of lawmakers. So not just road user charge, but what are the other options? And even with a list of all the options in front of us, how are we going to evaluate them to know which one or suite of them are better than the other? And so this was the rubric by which we started to evaluate different options. We looked at simplicity, robustness, fair and equitable, whether a tax source had sustainable revenue, whether it was efficient, secure, and integrated. In the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what each of those principles means. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I can come back to it if you have more specific answers. I do think it's really important to share the rubric so that we can demonstrate a commitment to understanding the pros and cons of all of these different options. It's not just, you know, pulling an option out of the hat and we're running with this one. So simplicity, one of the good things about the gas tax is it's very simple. It's collected at the distributor level. I think there's only a dozen around the state, right? So it's very easy to implement. There's very few points of sale, if you will, where the tax is being collected. And by and large, motorists know when they go to the pump, they're paying some level of tax, right? So what is owed and how to pay it are criteria that we want to contemplate when looking at the future. In terms of robustness, no false positives. People shouldn't be paying the tax if they're not utilizing transportation infrastructure, and no false negatives. You know, if you're using it, you should be paying the tax, and we should look at avoidance and evasion. The gas tax is hard to avoid and evade because you're forced to fuel up and it's there. But if the tax mechanism is detached from gasoline, it becomes a little bit easier to think of ways you could avoid, evade paying it, and then enforceability as well. Equitability and fairness. I think equity has a lot of different contexts in sort of modern policy conversations. In this case, we are talking about parties correctly paying the tax and having a remedy if they overpay in some way, that the purpose of the tax is known to the taxpayer, that they feel confident that the use of that money is going to its intended purpose. You know, there's a lot of constitutional protections around the existing gas tax. Voters love to pass those constitutional amendments because they feel very strongly taxes paid at the pump should go directly to transportation infrastructure. So we want to try to replicate some of those aspects of the existing system. The vertical and horizontal equity pieces are interesting, and I think we're going to spend a lot of time in the legislature when we get to that point on this effort. Should parties pay in relation to their means benefits? Question mark. You know, the gas tax was instated in 1908 or 1912, I think, in California. It's been around 100 years. People buying vehicles at that time were pretty consistent from a certain economic class. They got the fuel efficiency was the same across all cars. There wasn't necessarily a lot of thought to that, and it's certainly something that this current legislature thinks a lot about. The horizontal equity, parties in the same circumstance should pay the same. So those are sort of competing thoughts that I think, again, policymakers are going to have a lot of things to think about. Efficiency is the administrative cost. I always lump these 5 different criteria. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the effort to get the money out of it, or is the cost that we pay to collect the revenue worth it? And from Another perspective, sustainable revenue, what is sort of complementary to efficiency to me is enduring revenue. The gas tax has lasted over 100 years. This, by my measure, is going to be a monumental effort to try to come up with a supplement or a replacement to close that $31 billion gap or whatever it might be. And we should probably make sure this lasts hopefully another 100 years, whatever the time horizon is. We're not going to be able to keep, or I don't think it's very efficient of our time to keep coming up with new funding tools every 20 or 30 years. Security and integrated integration are two more newer aspects of what makes a good tax a better tax than another tax. Security, obviously, data is a huge concern. When we have looked at the feedback from pilot programs the state has already done, a lot of, and even just visceral reaction if you ask folks, if you ask motorists, you know, can your car communicate with the DMV to tell it how much it's been driving? It's like, get out of my car. I don't want the government having access to my data, right? And we can talk about how complicated that is, because if you have a cell phone in your car with you, right, or your car already knows where you're going, it's just who has access to that data, I suppose. But data security is a real thing that we need to be cognizant of in the modern world. And then integrated is whatever we come up with going to be complementary to the California specific taxation landscape. And then interoperability becomes a challenge in certain circumstances. You cross state lines, public-private roads is whatever method that we come up with able to sort of capture some of those challenges in terms of collecting revenue. So at the outset of the research, the researcher came up with 22 or 24 overall funding options. And as, again, city and county elected officials, you can appreciate we were able to strike several from the list almost immediately. For instance, property tax. Yes, is it technically an option before the legislature? Sure, but in the California policy and political landscape, that is not an option realistically, right? I think, but what we ended up doing was characterizing different funding options as user-based and non-user-based. And the gas tax was essentially and was intended to be a proxy tax for usage, or a proxy for a usage fee. So we focused just on those taxes and fee options that were related to the use of the infrastructure. So you could, I guess, one of the options is to almost do nothing, if you will. It's just to continue to increase the gas tax to try to generate the lost revenue from fuel efficiency and zero emission vehicles. The challenge with that is you have a world where motorists in internal combustion engine vehicle drivers are paying significantly more to drive and access infrastructure than those in a zero emission vehicle, or even, let's say, a truck. My dad drives a Ford F-150 versus my hybrid Highlander. The gas mileage is much different, right? And so, but we're doing the same damage to the roads. We're doing the same, we're getting the same utility out of that infrastructure. And so just going in and continuing to increase the fuel excise tax is not a viable option, if you will, by way of our analysis. It didn't check all of those boxes. A fuel sales tax performs poorly for that same reason. It's based on the purchasing of fuel. So you're going to have those same lack of fairness and equity issues. Vehicle registration fees, including registration fees on zero emission vehicles. SB 1 in 2017 created a new increment of registration fee. In California, the first time ever registration fees have been to support transportation infrastructure. Everything before that was DMV, CHP, traffic operations, all of those sorts of things. There's a lot of benefit to using a vehicle registration fee model. It's much simpler to collect. You could do it at time of annual registration, but it doesn't necessarily get at usage. James and I can have the same car, but I drive 1,000 miles a month and he drives 5,000 miles a month, but we're paying the same flat fee. So it doesn't necessarily perform well on some of those criteria. We looked at kilowatt hour tax, which is trending in international countries, and a few states in the country have established these. Essentially, you would keep the gas tax for fuel powered vehicles and then come up with an energy fee on electricity or commensurate fee for hydrogen. This performs really well. Its limitation is in its implementation. You need smart meters in folks' homes where they're charging. The public infrastructure is a little bit easier to get at. Already we're seeing challenges with multifamily dwellings not having access to charging. And so there's a lot of potential, but there are some limitations in that one. A road user charge, both based on time, which is essentially a registration fee. You just pay a flat fee to drive a certain amount of time, whether it's a day, a week, a year. And then distance based, actually paying for the miles that you drive. And then finally, statewide tolling is technically an option, but there are some limitations. I think, as I've mentioned before, I worked for the State Association of Counties for many years and have been sort of born and raised with the local perspective in mind. And how do you toll city streets and county roads? Like, it's much easier to accomplish that on a state highway system, but I just could not see how we could manage to sort of implement that in a way statewide that replaced the gas tax funding that cities and counties got, right? So those are the world of funding options that we looked at. And this is what the report ultimately concluded. You have three main options in front of you. The first is what we call the mixed array of fuel taxes. It's implementing that kilowatt hour or hydrogen tax and keeping the fuel taxes. Option two is a road user charge, that per mile, not per time, but per mile. That performed actually the highest across all of the criteria. Eliminate the fuel excise tax for all vehicles and implement it on all vehicles, regardless of fuel source. The third option is the mixed model. Phasing in a road user charge over time, starting with zero emission vehicles, because those are the vehicles that are paying the least right now. The research found on average, and this is heavily averaged, but on average, a zero emission vehicle driver driving the same amount as its internal combustion engine counterpart is paying 40% of what the internal combustion engine driver is buying. And one of the challenges with this in the equity, through an equity lens too, is those that have less fuel efficient vehicles tend to be lower socioeconomic stat. You know, they don't have the ability, the means to increase or to get newer vehicles that get more fuel efficiency. Again, some generalizations, but I think by and large, the data bears that out. And so this is what the report concluded. You basically have three options. You put a political lens over all of that information, and my organization is most interested in options 1 and 3. Kilowatt hour or a slow phase in of road user charge over time. I think the benefit.
Can you put that previous slide back up?
Sorry. I think you know, policy making is change making, and eliminating the gas tax full stop and transitioning to a zero emission or a road user charge at, you know, Jan 1, 2030, everyone's changing, takes a huge amount of effort and education. If we start under option 3 or under option 1, with a smaller segment of the vehicle population, those that are particularly not paying, if you will, a fair share compared to the other vehicles on the road, you're able to sort of scale up or down and learn lessons as you're rolling it out. And maybe you stop at just zero emission vehicles and you never turn over a road charge for an internal combustion engine vehicle, but it certainly provides policymakers options as they move forward in time. So my organization, I'm on the road. I'm doing these presentations to anyone that will have me and is interested in learning about what some of the future of transportation funding is looking like. We're doing public outreach and education as well. We've done a statewide poll and some focus groups. Quickly, I was pleasantly surprised at the reception the focus groups and polling had for the concept of a road user charge on zero emission vehicles. Some of the takeaways that I like to share. ZEV drivers said, oh, we realized we were saving money at the pump because we weren't buying gas, but we never connected that to us not paying the gas tax. And we like good roads and we benefit from good roads, so we should pay our fair share. So I think 9 out of 10 ZEV drivers said we should pay a commensurate amount as an ICE driver. I will never forget a gentleman from one of the focus groups who was self-identified conservative voter, anti-tax, said no new taxes. The government doesn't spend my tax dollars properly today. And we walked him through some of the challenges with some people paying and some people don't. And he was like, wait, so I don't pay, but they pay? I'm already paying, and this is just making them pay their fair share. I'm on board too. So the totality of that feedback was that I think we had over 2/3 support of all focus group users, and the statewide poll was open to this concept. So I thought that was really positive. Assemblymember Wilson has a bill, AB 1421, that does not dictate anything right now. It merely extends the life of the road user charge pilot program, but it's a placeholder. It was a way for us to say, here is a spot bill. We're putting a pin in this issue. This issue is important and it's timely and we need to do something, and it helps us coalesce around something. And so she has, in talking to the public, mentioned consistently that this will be a multi-year effort. This was year 1. I could see it taking another year, 2 more years, 3 more years, right? Till we get to that finish line, and that she wants to have a collaborative approach. And then we're going to continue to do research into the other kilowatt hour options, sort of knowing the pros and cons and getting into more nuanced detail about some of the limitations and how we might overcome some of those challenges as we get closer to picking a solution, if you will. And my organization wants to hear from its regional partners. You know, the statewide transportation construction industry works hand in hand with sales tax counties. And so your feedback is vitally important for the work that we're doing as well. And so I appreciate you all making some time for me to wear this hat in front of you for a little bit today to talk about the future of transportation funding issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will bring it back. Or James, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so just before we start the discussion, I wanted to also just give the flip side of, what's happening on the federal side as well. So I've also invited Kyriakos Pagonis from MMO Partners to just give a little bit of an overview. He could introduce the team too.
Great.
Thanks, James.
We wanna
Madam
pause
Chair, Madam Vice
people
Chair,
to- oh,
nice to be with
hang
you
on.
tonight. I'll turn this over to
I can't
John, and
hear
John
us,
can lead
apparently.
us through this next section.
Hold on one second, John.
Maybe he could hear you. I just want to check because I'm guessing there are a lot of questions on the presentation that we just saw. So I don't know if we should break it into 2 or if folks can just kind of write down their questions and okay, we'll just make sure if you have any questions on that first presentation, write them down and we'll take it all at the end. Because I think that it's a very interesting conversation. And I'm guessing a lot of folks have some questions. Okay, go ahead.
John, do you want to lead us off here?
Members of the committee, John O'Donnell from MMO Partners in Washington. I'll just make a brief statement about some of the major legislative activities here, which you are certainly well aware of. Reconciliation is the large issue right now. This week, the House Ways and Means Committee, the House Agriculture Committee, and the Energy and Commerce Committee will have markups. In fact, Energy and Commerce begins tomorrow. They are charged with coming up with $880 billion worth of cuts over the next 10 fiscal years. Over the weekend, the committee worked on its rough outline, which will be marked up tomorrow, and several things that are in that bill that were of concerns to local governments are Medicaid cuts, and it appears that the large programs that would affect state and local government, the FMAP program and the per capita funding for Medicaid recipients are not going to be touched. What they will be addressing is a work-related requirement for recipients of Medicaid. And also, they are going to require people to verify their standing. And I don't know if it's going to be once a year or twice a year, but those are elements of the legislation that they'll be looking at tomorrow. The plan for the House is to finish its portion of reconciliation by the Memorial Day recess, and then the Senate would look at what the legislation, excuse me, the legislation is from the House during the month of June. And I think what they'd like to do is try to finish it by the July 4th recess. The other major piece in this legislation, and then I mentioned Ways and Means as one of the three committees, is the state and local tax deduction and also tax exempt bonds, which are a major piece of financing for local governments and state governments. We participated in a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting this morning where the person who handles that issue, the taxation issues, was pretty optimistic about the protection for tax exempt bonds. It seems like members of the House, both sides of the aisle, have heard a lot from state and local government about the importance of tax exempt bonds. But as the federal affairs person at the Conference of Mayors said this morning, we're not taking that for granted. They're making sure that the Ways and Means Committee are hearing from mayors, and I think NACO and the National League of Cities are doing the same thing, even at the 11th hour, making sure they know that, and hearing again about the importance of tax exempt financing for local governments. Kyriakos, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Yeah,
let
and
you do that.
thanks, John. Sure, I'll just add on, the other piece of this that's really connected to the conversation tonight is the House T&I Committee's requirement to find revenue to offset some of the tax policies in the bill. And I think we've reported previously and was alluded to earlier, there is an effort to raise revenue on EVs and plug-in hybrids, et cetera. So the current play is $250 per electronic vehicle. And then I think I got $100 for hybrids. And what's interesting with that, and I'll let Chris Newman sort of go into a little bit more of the detail, but the Ways and Means Committee just released their portion of the reconciliation package, which, and we're still going through the 430 plus page bill, does do what I think everybody expected was coming, which was to remove some of the credits for electric vehicles and some of the other clean energy credits that I know SCTCA has advocated for. But we're still going through that, and the Ways and Means bill will certainly have an impact on the revenue projections that the T&I committee was expecting to generate from EV sales. So on the one hand, they're taking away credits that helped, I think, spur some of the sales for EVs. Which the T&I committee is using to raise revenue. Chris, I'll let you jump in here with some of your take on this, and please do a quick introduction for the group.
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Newman. I work with MMO Partners. I'm former Federal Highway Administration, so I've been working with them as an engineering consultant and helping understand some of these things from a reauthorization standpoint. I think the observations that Kyriakos is making in terms of reconciliation, I think ultimately will have a substantial bearing on how Congress approaches the reauthorization funding. Right now, the Transportation Trust, or Highway Trust Fund, has been operating at a serious deficit. Since 2016, it's basically been bottoming out and being replaced by general funds from Congress. Under this reconciliation model and tax cuts or program cuts model, it's likely that there will be less money available from the general fund to stand in that. So I think they're looking at ways to try to make the trust fund more self-sufficient, which is something that they've been, I mean, that's been on the discussion since for the last several reauthorization cycles. A lot of the conversation for their initial hearings has revolved around the same things that we heard in Ms. Valentine's presentation. There's a recognition that the funding, keeping the funding at a high level is very essential to the robust health of our transportation system, but that with EVs not contributing anything and with the significant purchasing power lost due to inflation, there needs to be some new approach, most likely some sort of hybrid amongst the balance of raising the gas tax, finding ways to account for EV contribution, and or using the road user charge model. I think a lot of the discussions on the Hill have acknowledged that there have been these pilot programs going for quite some time, and the question whether that's going to be ready to implement on a national basis for this cycle of reauthorization. There might be some technical and administrative hurdles which might be too complex to handle this time, but maybe look at a way of introducing that as a means of helping to pay for the highway program in the short term. So we will be looking with great interest on the kinds of discussions that they have. I was in the Senate in 2017 and 18 in approach for the last reauthorization, and would have loved to have had that rubric that Politico put together. I think that is going to be a very helpful tool in their hands. I think it is important to be able to look at everything, not just from a dollars bottom line perspective, but the user privacy, the equity of the users. I think the overall recognition is that that to supplement it or make up the difference in a do nothing model with general funds is the least equitable approach to it, because it's taking money from people who may not even be using the transportation system at all. So I think we'll be looking with great interest and continuing to report on what we're seeing in Congress. I think the takeaway that I saw was that in terms of trucking, the truckers are a major user of the road system and a major source of damage. ATA has been expressing, the American Trucking Association has been expressing for years that they wish that they would raise the gas tax on diesel, because they acknowledge that that they are a major road user, and that it is valuable to trucking interests that the road system remain healthy. I also noted that the notion of raising revenue, especially even the thought of raising the gas tax, didn't automatically create a sharp political or sharp divide between members on either side of the aisle. The Democrats have always been for that. The Republicans have traditionally been very vocally opposed to it, but I did not hear nearly as strong opposition in recent hearings to the thought of trying to index the gas tax to inflation, which would make an enormous difference. With that, Kyriakis, I'll hand it back to you and John.
Thanks, Chris. And James, I think that's our portion of this presentation. We'll kick it back to you.
Great. And so now I'll open it up to questions from my colleague, Director Rabbit.
Thank you all. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Kiana. Always good to see you. Kiana, I used to know this number back in the day. What year was the peak of gas tax? I mean, it's been declining over the course of time because of the fuel efficiency standards. And I'm just wondering what the purchasing power loss from that year forward has been. And when you talk about all these different alternatives, I'm assuming where are they trying to go back to? What's in pocket today, or what was in pocket previously that we've lost out on?
Defeated SB1 in 2017. We had lost approximately 50% purchasing power since the mid 90s when it was last increased. There was about a 23 or 24 year gap between increases. We added 12 cents. That basically got us back to where we were, undid the inflationary impact, if you will, and then we indexed it to inflation. And so you've seen gas taxes year over year go a little bit up, go a little bit down, depending on what's been going on in the overall economy. So I haven't seen anything particularly in the current economic situation with respect to inflation and what it's doing to purchasing power. I do know construction costs are skyrocketing. And so I could only imagine there is some impact. I just haven't seen any sort of statistical evidence on it.
Okay. Anything to add?
And I think the second part of that, supervisor, if I will, or director in this context, is my industry in the current moment, Transportation California is interested in closing that $30 billion projected loss. It's not necessarily about going and increasing taxes beyond that, but it's making up the delta to keep us basically where we were at in 2017 when we passed SB1.
Director Harvey?
Could you explain a little bit more how the kilowatt hour tax works? Because people charge their EVs all over the place. So how would that one?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have complete answers to it, but conceptually, if you charge at a public charging station, and I don't own an EV yet, but I'm assuming there is an account with your VIN number and license information and sorts of things like that, and it knows how much energy you're using, and you would be potentially taxed at the point of purchase there or in some other mechanism. Say you charge at home. There are smart meters that could tell you exactly how much energy was used for the charging of your vehicle versus all of the other utilities that use electricity in your home. And then alternatively, but this one has some limitations, electric vehicles are modern day cars and they have all of that data in the vehicle itself. The challenge is a lot of the manufacturers and the dealers don't necessarily share that data now, and I don't know their willingness to do so. We have started having conversations with those organizations. So in the states that have done it, they are primarily using it to capture electric vehicles coming in from out of state. They haven't implemented it broadly as an alternative to the gas tax, but they're saying the Oregonian coming in across state lines in a Nissan Leaf and is charging at a public station, you're going to be driving, or the assumption is you'll be driving on California public roads. So we'll charge a kilowatt hour tax on that population of vehicles. And so that's what we've seen, at least in the US thus far.
Thank you.
Director Corsi?
Thank you. I'm all for everybody paying their share here. I don't really care a whole lot of between the three. I don't know why just by the mile doesn't work. I mean, we've been looking at that for, what has it been, 6, 7 years now? I used to have the device in my car. But as long as everyone pays, what I worry about is the length of time it takes to implement any of these options. At $3 billion loss a year on average is what we're hearing. And is there any way to speed this up?
If I got to wave my magic wand, we would have a bill passed next year and it would be signed by the governor. And in talking with the state, they would need, depending on what funding tool or package of tools is included, would need 2 to 3 years to ramp up. So in its quickest, it is a 5-year runway. So I absolutely hear you. And it's something that we've been thinking about very closely. There are a lot of nuanced details we have to figure out between now and when that bill gets passed. And that's what we'll be spending the next part of this year working on. So the quickest way to speed it up is to start to do the research, as far as I can tell, and just start hammering out the details.
Seems that there could be some interim steps here, particularly on the charging side. We're already charging some fees there. I don't know, just, we're watching money walk out the door, and it's just crazy to me.
Other questions from my colleagues? I have a question in terms of the road user charge. Is there anything kind of honing in on what kind of data that would be like? Are we talking about actually tracking where everyone goes, or are we looking at how do we gather odometer, data? Has there been kind of a particular solution identified? And I actually sort of count myself in the camp of people who don't really like government to be totally up in their business. And I think a lot of the folks I represent out in West County feel the same way. I would also just add that in terms of data security, we now are in a country where the Department of Homeland Security is now entering into contracts with the social service agencies in an attempt to actually gather data in order to deport non-citizens. And so my concern would be, for instance, if the state of California has access to that kind of data that could provide, even potentially real-time or near-time tracking, even if it's not real-time, you're going to see someone always returning to their home, right? And so if that data becomes part of a potential public record that could be ultimately requested or even subpoenaed by the federal government, that puts us in a very tricky situation. And so I'm just curious, when we're talking about road user charges, if we have really looked into how to address many of those issues, both the kind of ick factor of government knowing where you travel, and then also the actual very real data security concerns.
At this point in time, and that's what the next phase of our research is really going to look at. But from what I know to be true, in order to be successful, and we've seen other states do this, you have to provide motorists a range of options, because what I'm comfortable with, you will not be comfortable with, or vice versa. So you could have, when I participated in the pilot program, I snapped a photo of my odometer once a month. It went through a third-party provider app to the DMV, and I got a simulated bill in the mail. So it was very low tech. You can have a GPS-enabled transponder or your car talking to the DMV if you're comfortable with that. And there's trade-offs inherently in the technological choices, because the more tech-enabled you get, you can know when you're going on public-private roads, when you're crossing state lines. You could tell if you're driving on a state highway versus city-county facility. Some of those are helpful things to know, but it's not necessary. And so I think we have to land in a place that's options so consumers can pick what they're comfortable with. That's sort of my bottom line, I think, with a very low tech option as the sort of foundation.
I think that's very helpful. And I do think that a range of options seems like it would be most appealing to the public. Although then you also think about deep fake videos and how people are going to be constantly trying to beat the system of the low tech options. But
I mean, I didn't have an app on my phone that could change my odometer convincingly, but I probably could find one now. So yes, those are real concerns as we think about what option to go in on.
Yep. Director Giudice.
Yeah, any thought to an interim DMV registration charge on an annual basis for electric vehicles?
They pay one now. Part of SB1 does require, I don't know why these nuanced details I have known for years are slipping me today. How much is the EV fee? $100. Thank you. $100 a year. Not
only for 2020 and later model years.
Thank you. Okay, so if you're driving an electric vehicle pre-2020 model year, you're getting off scot-free. You're sort of carved out, no contribution to, maybe that's where we start. No contribution to the roads. For 2020 model years and later, you pay $100 registration.
What does the average gas car, like who's driving 12,000 miles a year, what do they typically pay in taxes?
Gas taxes,
Correct.
$338 plus registration fee.
There we go. So we can lift it.
250.
No doubt. I think part of it is a political calculation as to how many 2/3 tax votes this legislature is willing to take and how many 2/3 tax votes is the governor willing to sign. That would be the simplest thing to do right now, immediately. And we've thought about it for sure, and it's not off the table. But there are a lot of political calculations that we have to think about there.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Following up, I'm just curious, I mean, in these conversations, especially around, the political calculations, are folks thinking about continuing the gas tax and adding this, or actually repealing the gas tax?
I can speak for my organization at this point. if we were to go forward with a road user charge on zero emission vehicles, you would leave the gas tax alone. If you wanted to do a full-blown rollout, you would have to eliminate the gas tax and replace it with road charge. There's just no way taxpayers would abide paying both, nor could they afford to right now. So that's our sort of starting place.
And we assume that gas would become cheaper if, I'll just leave that as a rhetorical question. Yeah, right. With that, are there any other questions, Director Harvey?
So is also part of the complication with the road user tax, the fact that particularly in California, we have a lot of people crossing state lines. And so they're, they're coming in here and they have no obligation to send anybody their information, as you explained, the SNAP once a month thing. How is that part of the details that complicate this?
It's yes.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of states doing interesting things where they are able to, you could use a road user charge time permit, for instance, for an internal combustion engine vehicle crossing state lines that says, oh, you're going to be here for a week. You're going to Lake Tahoe or to Yosemite and you're going to be here for a week. It'll be $50 and you can drive unlimited. So there are things that folks are doing. It just depends on the solution we pick. Then you have to sort of figure out the options to capture that. If you're a California resident, though, that's where the high tech versus low tech becomes helpful because it can tell where you're driving. And so you're not paying on miles when you leave the state, right? So.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question, is interstate tolling a violation of interstate commerce laws? Because I think that is a really interesting question. And especially given that a lot of that actually is heavy trucking, which actually disproportionately impacts the roads.
I don't know if I have an answer. I don't know if it's, I don't have an answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yes.
Awesome presentation, I just want to say. I just want to make sure I got the number right. I did a thumbnail calculation. I came up with $250 in gas tax a year, but you said 330, if I remember what you said, average 12,000 mile user, something like that.
I do not have a average how many miles per year driven for that 338 figure. That's just the average that a Californian pays in gas tax.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pin you down on that. I'm just trying to make sure I got the numbers right. And so to bring the EV people up to par, you might, for instance, charge them, as you said, $100 is one number that is used somewhere along the line. Might be $200, might be some number like that, right?
Yeah.
Those numbers are about in the ballpark. Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any final questions? Seeing none, I will ask if any members of the public in person wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, is there anyone online, Ross?
Yes, Madam Chair. And we will start with Rick Lutman.
Yeah, thank you. Am I on?
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Rick Lutman again from the Citizens Advisory Committee. I just hope it is not forgotten in all this discussion that the whole idea of zero emission vehicles in the first place was to try to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, because the combustion of fossil fuels is killing us. So one of the advantages to ZEV was the fact that you not only don't pay for fuel, but you don't pay for the tax on fuel. Now, this is not to say they shouldn't pay any taxes because they're still using roads, but you don't want to make sure you don't take away their financial incentive to use a ZEV, and also let's be fair to the people who already own them. They may have made a calculation when they bought it that they were going to save money through not having to buy fuel. And they could be quite annoyed if the rules suddenly change and they have to pay for it again. Anyway, there's something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And we have one additional public comment. Next, we have Tom Conlon. Tom, I have allowed you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks. Tom Collins speaking as an individual here in Sonoma Valley. Just very, very informative presentation. So thank you for that. I was pleased to hear Mr. Newman describe the weight of the vehicle, that dimension. My granddaughter is a very enthusiastic road user at the age of 3. She drives a 1930s era tricycle. Do you think that any charges that she would be paying would be much for the trucks that pass me in this area? Also, in the differential we see currently in California law between the gas tax versus the registration fee for electric vehicles, important to remember that I haven't heard today any discussion of the social cost of carbon, and that should be front and center in at least in the state of California, as we entertain this policy change, which is obviously critically needed. So thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Thank you, Tom. I do not see any additional public comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. With that, I will bring it back to the board for any final remarks. Anyone? Seeing none, this is just a presentation, so there's no action to take, but thank you so much for the work. And with that, we will be going on to our legislative update, which is an action item as we provide direction to staff on establishing positions on pending legislation. And I'll hand it over to our Executive Director, James Cameron, to kick it off.
Thank you. So the next item is 5.3. I prepared a brief PowerPoint to talk about the staff report. Just before I jump into the staff report, so, there's dozens of pages here about our legislative advocacy, both state and federal. We have all the experts in the room here, both on Zoom from our federal folks and our state folks in the back, really looking for input from this board as to, where they would like us to focus or where you would like us to focus. And, know that at any time on any one of these issues or something that comes across within your jurisdiction, feel free to reach out to me and realize that we have these resources at our call to support, advocacy on part of all of SCTCA. So with that being said, a very brief PowerPoint presentation to go through here. We're going to talk about the legislative process for bills that we just touched on at our last meeting, a brief state update, the state bills positions, which are unchanged from the April board action, a federal update, and then, of course, to reminder, those full packets that we get monthly reports from both MMO partners as well as Politico Group. So on the bill position or legislative process for bill positions, there's different processes that we've followed in the past, right? And it's been a delegation to the executive director based on our legislative principles that we have. So those legislative principles, we revisit every year with the board and usually make minor tweaks to them. They're included in your board packet. There's also links to them that are available where anything that I operate or give approval to our government consultants here to advocate on our behalf, follow those legislative principles. If something's a little bit more contentious or, I don't feel that the legislative principles cover us or that it needs board discussion, I always will rely on some leadership from a chair or vice chair. In the past, we've formed a ad hoc. We've also had an executive committee give opinions on our legislative position. And then the third is, kind of the obvious of when positions aren't necessarily or unrelated to adopted legislative principles, they will go before the board. Also just on those larger items like last year when we were dealing with the regional transportation measure that was potentially not going to have a appropriate return to source of funds. Those are something we came here and adopted specific principles just for that legislation. So all of these options before the board for consideration include options, will have this monthly check-in with the board where the board will have the option to, give the concurrence or provide additional direction on our positions on these bills. Going forward, there are several support positions that we have established at the last meeting. And then there's a couple of opposed unless amended positions. Staff would recommend, I work at least with the chair on those opposed unless amend positions, or get more direction from the board as to a higher elevation. But the higher the elevation, kind of the slower the response time, the more effort. I want to make sure I'm representing the board, open to your input. Quick state update, gas tax replacement. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. It is very timely, and we are behind the curve both on the federal and the state revenue sources with regard to that. More focused on the state based on the presentation that you saw. Climate bond, next major update. We will be getting a May budget revise soon. We'll be back with more information on that and how we're collaborating around the entire county to advocate for climate bond notice of funding opportunities as the appropriations roll out. Cap and trade extension is advancing this year. I hope you all saw the governor's press release last week with regard to that. They're committing to making that extension in 2025, and then that targeted effort on bills. The targeted effort on bills, as I stated before, no changes in positions since our April board action. Jumping into the federal side of things. So MTC has an annual trip that they do every year for DC advocacy. I plan to join that trip week after next to go with them, to go back and advocate primarily for, whatever certainty we can have in these uncertain times. And the number one issue would be to continue those formulaic funds that are not being impacted by the federal actions continuing. So with regard to the next federal surface transportation reauthorization, we really want to keep those federal formula funds at their current funding levels as they were in the current surface transportation reauthorization. We also have had some of your jurisdictions that reach out to us for support for their fiscal year 26 community project requests, those discretionary grants that are at risk that we want to be advocating on behalf of. The FEMA BRIC grants that, multiple of our jurisdictions, including the county, have had significant impacts with the cancellation of that program. We want some clarity on the latest letter from the U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Duffy, where it's in your packet. It involves both immigration and diversity, equity, inclusion, and how that's going to affect future grants going forward. And then, that last bullet there that I did talk about is really the lead in, the supporting those sub allocations to local governments where we can have more certainty in those federal funds. In summary, consider providing direction to staff on our positions and that pending legislation. Also consider providing direction to staff on both the process and the pending legislation. And then last, receive those federal and state updates. So that will conclude my presentation. I hope we can come up with a good process moving forward that will satisfy the board's needs. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from my colleagues? Director Corsi?
Thank you, James. I just want to make sure that I understand the three-step, or the call it the three-step legislative principles test there. That's what we're doing now, right? Okay.
It's what we're doing now, and it's what we have been doing. And there was at least a couple bills that happened in April that needed more discussion that are still getting that discussion now.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Director Giudice?
No, I'm in support of the process. Once we delegate authority and in conjunction with the chair, once we establish the principles, I think we give him full authority and don't micromanage.
I'm seeing some nodding heads. All right. So I don't think do we need a formal motion for this, or we're just going to provide direction to staff?
The general direction that I've received is fine. There was no formal motion about the process at the last meeting. Unless there's a desire to change one of our positions on the bills or any other action, there's no formal board action needed for this item.
Perfect. Great. All right. Well, I think we have then given direction, but let's make sure that we go to public comment. Is there anyone in person who wishes to comment on item 5.3? Seeing none. Ross, anyone online?
We do have one person online. We have Tom Conlon. Tom, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thanks again. Tom Conlon, this time speaking in my capacity as chair of the SCTCA Climate Action Advisory Committee. At our last meeting, our meeting on Friday of last week, two bills did come up. We reiterated our support for the oppose unless amended stance on AB 306 Schultz, which is that bill that would I don't have exactly what that is in front of me right now, and it's slipping my mind. But the one bill that's not on your list that we'd hope that you would take into consideration is a support position on SB 500 Stern. This is a bill that would look at performance-based rate making required of utilities, the public investor-owned utilities in California. It's supported by the Climate Center, number of environmental organizations, and it's opposed by the three major investor-owned utilities. Again, it's the kind of thing that in this era where we're worried about affordability and the impacts of unaffordable energy on our building electrification and transportation electrification objectives, we think this is a bill that you might want to take a look at and consider for support. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Tom. I do not see anyone else wishing to speak from the public.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that suggestion. I am not familiar with the Stern bill. Does anyone have any? So that might be something that we need to look into and potentially bring back to the board and then go through the process that we've established. Okay. All right. Wonderful. With that, any further comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, appreciate the consensus, and we've got a plan for how to deal with this and how to stay nimble going forward. With that, let's go ahead and move on to SCTCA Funding Program Cycle 2 Draft Evaluation Criteria, which will be presented by Shauna.
Good afternoon, Directors. Shauna Gause, Senior Programming and Projects. We're here today to give you, I'll wait for just a second. Let me pull that up. Well, I can give the introduction anyway. We're here today to give you an informational update on the SCTCA funding program. And to do that, I'd like to give a summary of what the previous cycle looked like. And then I'll turn it over to David to talk about our investments in the last cycle and what the upcoming cycle will look like. And then we can finish up with a brief discussion of the evaluation criteria that will be used to score the applications for the new program and a schedule for taking us from applications to programming funds.
Your clicker.
Great, thank you. So about 4 years ago, we recognized that several fund sources were expected to have calls for projects. And so with the board's direction, we took the approach of consolidating the calls for projects to ensure that the resources were coordinated and directed to the highest priorities. Sponsors submit the top 5 priorities from each jurisdiction.
We're receiving a call from the above. We're being summoned.
My apologies. Please proceed.
It's with the little image, right? We've got the glowing clouds. Suddenly we're seeing it's raining.
This allowed the SCTA to pair submitted projects with the best fund sources available. In that call for projects, we received 65 applications totaling more than $220 million. And we had about $62.5 million available. So the first project selected to receive funding were equaled about 9.3 million from the State Transportation Improvement Program, since those needed to be programmed in the earliest of all the funding sources. Another 6 projects received a little over $4 million from the Quick Strike program. And on the transit side, staff was able to bundle a number of transit objects submitted into a transit and intercity rail capital program application that was successfully awarded almost $25 million to the operators in the county. So staff reviewed all of the applications that were submitted for the various funding programs and scored each project against uniform criteria. Then adjustments were made for geographic equity, eligibility for certain funding sources, and which projects addressed regional and performance, regional goals and performance measures. This provided a balanced program of projects with a multimodal investment approach that benefited the entire region. Between the successful TIRSIP application and the SCTA funding program, each applicant received transportation funding that was right-sized to the eligibility requirements and goals of the funding program and the local regional transportation plan. After the initial cycle, additional funding sources became available and staff were able to use the list of priority projects already submitted but not selected for funding in the first round to make recommendations to the board that augmented the original funding program. The board also chose to fund a smart crossing in Windsor that provides access across tracks for high school students. So the augmentation added more than $34 million to the previously programmed projects, leveraging additional funding for the transportation in the county. With that, I'll hand it over to David.
Shauna. So right here, we have a pie chart showing the investments that are made through all the different funding programs that Shauna was described between 2021 and 2024. This included about 41% of the funds went towards bike pedestrian projects, 27% of the funds went towards transit capital projects, about 2% towards transit operating funds for transit expansion projects in the city of Aloma. About 22% of the funds are for traffic operational improvement projects or capacity increasing projects. And also 8% were geared towards projects that mostly help pavement preservation. We anticipate for this upcoming SCTA funding cycle 2 or SCTCA funding cycle 2, as we're calling it now, we're going to see similar distributions of funding based on our board's scoring criteria that you'll be reviewing, and then also looking at what our agency goals are. We're not looking at increasing the widths of our pavement anymore. We're not looking at widening highways or interchanges for the most part, but we're really looking at fixing it first and looking how we can shift our modes of transportation in this county. So we're anticipating having to call for projects this summer. We're coming back to you hopefully next month to get your approval on that call for projects, and then applications we do in August. We'll be asking all the cities and the transit operators in the county and the county of Sonoma to submit their top priority projects. The projects that we are asking the jurisdictions to submit must be in our comprehensive transportation plan update that Chris's team is working on right now. We have an updated project list on our website showing all those available projects, including categories that capture many of those smaller projects that don't necessarily have a dollar amount to come up to have a whole separate listing. We anticipate coming back to you to have recommendations for funding awards from fall 2025 through spring 2027. This is a table that's from your staff report showing the different funding sources we anticipate to be available. All these funding sources are projections at this point and we adjusted, but we anticipate about 19.8 million being available through NTC through the One Area Grant Cycle 4, which is the closest federal fund. That's 4 years worth of funding from that funding source, along with 16 million from the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is another source for our region. We also have $2 million from the Central One Local Partnership Program that we anticipate will be available over the next 2 SB1 cycles. And then from the local side, we have significant investment from our social and sales tax, both the move traffic and improved safety category and the built bikeways and pathway category. Those comprise almost $50 million on their own, and so almost half the funds that are available. A new fund source we have on here is the Greater Tribal Mitigation Funds. We are in the process of negotiating an agreement with the county to receive funds through the county's new agreement they have with the tribe and to identify the eligible uses and recipients of those funds. And those would be restricted similar to the previous agreement, which had eligible projects south of Highway 12 and north of the Marin County line, primarily focused on collectors and materials that improve access to the casino, or whether there be further restrictions, perhaps limited to jurisdictions that don't have their own agreement with the tribe for specific projects. So we want to be sure that we negotiate something that is acceptable not only to the tribe, but also the county and to benefit SCTA. Get a little bit more detail on those. So we have one cycle 4, as I described earlier. We anticipate having similar targets as the previous OVAG cycle, and that's going to be a competitive process. Before, prior to OVAG 3, we used to receive a set target from MTC and given a similar share of federal funds, and now that's more of a target based on what the Federal Highway Administration is requiring. Last cycle, we did well and performed a little bit above our target, a little bit more money than our share, but it's still gonna be a very competitive process, and we have to choose like the best projects for that planning. For the State Transportation Improvement Program, that has the tightest timeline. We'll have to come up with recommendations to the board in September, so that we can send those recommendations to the MTC in October, so they can be adopted by the California Transportation Commission in March of 2026. We're pairing that with these local partnership formula funds as well, since they have similar requirements, and that one you can have a little bit more state funds all programmed at the same time. As I described earlier, we have the Green Tribal Mitigation Fund that will have specific requirements that we're going to have to identify. And then we're still negotiating agreement with the county to continue to those funds, subject to future appropriations by the board of supervisors. And with that, I will turn it back over to Shauna to talk about the process.
So David mentioned a lot of this, but in the previous cycle, where there was a maximum of 5 applications per jurisdiction that were allowed, or transit operator that were allowed. And the jurisdiction, some of the larger jurisdictions found this limit challenging due to high need. So staff is currently proposing to increase to 10 applications maximum for Santa Rosa, Sonoma County to use jurisdiction size. And the transit operators will retain also 5 applications. So City of Santa Rosa technically gets 15, Sonoma technically gets 15, but we are splitting them between transit operators and the public works. So all the projects will be evaluated by staff and receive by the SCTCA staff, and we're very open to including jurisdictional staff on the evaluation teams. So we will make sure that there aren't any conflicts of interest, but we would like to involve jurisdictional staff so that this is a very open and understood process. And the applications will receive a consensus team score using the criteria that are being vetted through the advisory committees, and will ultimately come before the board for approval next month. The evaluation criteria address established goals from Plan Bay Area, the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and the Sonoma County Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy, and Go Sonoma. So staff is proposing these criteria to help evaluate the next cycle of project applications. These are very similar to the last cycle, but we've added 5 points each under the categories of collision and safety, public participation and community support, and employment opportunities and access to training and education, for a total of 200 points. Last time we had 185. The evaluation criteria help establish the benefits to equity priority communities, potential mode shift, safety, community engagement, emission reduction, and project readiness. So David covered a lot of this, but just to sort of reiterate, the delivery schedule of the funding program, we are taking input for the evaluation criteria this month from all our committees and the board. Next month, we will seek approval from the board for the final evaluation criteria and release the call for projects. Sponsors will have until August to submit and develop and submit their priority projects to SCTA for evaluation. And as in the last cycle, the first order of business will be to recommend the projects that best fit into the State Transportation Improvement Program. David talked a lot about that. And then the STIP will be approved by CTC in March of 2026. And MTC will issue their call for projects for the One Bay Area grant funds in March also. Staff will bring recommendations to the committees in July of 2026 and July and August of 2026, and then bring the recommendations to the SCTCA board in September of 2026. And MTC will take from October to December to evaluate and come up with staff recommendations in December next year, and final commission approval in January of 2027. Staff will then bring final SCTCA funding program recommendations to the SCTCA board in February. And that summer, staff will develop the first update to the Go Sonoma Strategic Implementation Plan. So this presentation is for your information, and we'll be back in June to request final approval. We are calling this the SCTCA funding plan because it includes funding sources like Go Sonoma that require both SCTCA and RCPA committee involvement. So now is a great time to check in with your jurisdictional staff on priorities from the planning efforts that have been made on the active transportation plan, the comprehensive transportation plan, and the community-based transportation plans. These prioritized lists will be used for both the SCTCA funding cycle 2 and our short-term implementation plan. And the goal is to fund all the projects and leverage all these funding dollars. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Giudice.
Thanks. And just very grateful to staff at SCTA. You know, that Complete Streets grant was kind of like the brick grant that we lost, right? Several years ago, when the Republicans and the Democrats were arguing about balancing budget, they took our Complete Streets grant away. And so that was the whole Southwest project. You did a magnificent job of backfilling that through state funding, and we're very grateful. And it's underway right now, and it's going to help to connect Crane Creek with eventually out at the Laguna de Santa Rosa once we get the bike and ped over crossing. Something that you should know, we were successfully renegotiated the MOU with Creighton Rancheria, and on an annual basis, they give us $13.3 million. It goes into 17 different mitigation funds, and all of it, unfortunately, is restricted funding. So it's not general fund money. Part of the renegotiation of the MOU requires that Roanoke Park do $40 million of improvements in and around the casino, transportation improvements over the next several years while they do the remodeling. If we cannot come up with that money, we would technically be in breach of contract. So that's something that is heavy on our minds. The budget is approved. In the next couple of weeks, we will have put $15 million aside to try to accomplish that. The casino is moving very fast forward with lightning speed. So that bill is going to come due sooner than later. So that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. So thank you for the report. And I just wanted to give everybody that update as to what we're up against.
Thank you. Director Okrepke.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions on clarifying criteria, or the flexibility of the criteria. So in the scoring rubric under certain things like the EPCs, so it says to take place within an EPC, but could a project be considered if it maybe connected EPCs, or if it was a route that was a major usage area for EPCs?
So you get specific points for serving an EPC, and then you get additional points if you're in it.
Okay. And then when it comes to mobility, if you increase a high stress to a low stress, would that be considered the same at a high stress facility to a low stress facility? Would that be considered the same in terms of mobility?
Changing mobility mode?
Yeah.
It's sort of case by case, and we will do our best to apply that criteria. But the intent is if a case is made for, I guess, let me back up. It is for the applicant to demonstrate that there will be a mode shift. So if we see that if there will be a mode shift from high stress to low stress, then and a case can be made, then we will count those.
Okay, great, thank you. And then lastly, improve public health along the same lines. So if you're decreasing traffic flow, less carbon, less greenhouse gases, would that be considered increasing public health as well?
I think so, yes. I mean, it's very subjective and we will do our best, but if case is made that we're gonna see some demonstrable change, then we will count this one.
Okay, so you're not going to be sticklers and the onus is on us to convince you.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you, Director Harvey.
Yes, I had a little bit of concern with the collision and safety rubric. It seems to be almost extremely based upon crash rates. Where we now have been being pushed by state density bonus law to increase the density in areas, we now are finding ourselves in positions of people coming in and out of newly built developments or to be built developments. There is no data. And you know that someone coming in and out on a roadway that's going 55 miles an hour with 1,500 trips in and out, there is going to be a problem. And this implies that we have to have crashes and deaths before anything can be done. So I just am curious because this density problem is popping up all over the place, and some of our, even our regular streets were not meant for that amount of automobiles to be plopping out, just out of nowhere. And for instance, we have 3 developments that are all next to one another. 2 have been entitled, and those 2 add 300 units. We have another one coming before us tomorrow night that adds another 175 units. And each one of those says, not my problem to fix the problem. And I just am concerned that we need to account for to-be crashes in a better way.
And thank you, Director Harvey. Yeah, so we are very concerned as well about preventing future crashes, not only looking at the past data, but also looking at proactively the future. And so that's why we're always looking at what is the project going to do to help reduce future collisions as well. For example, the example you brought up, we worked with the city to fund in our SCTCA augmentation last cycle, $1 million for Measure N to go towards the Highway 116 West Kentucky Avenue intersection project, which will help improve access to those developments. And we are always looking at not only what does the data say, but what does the overall project story tell. And so it may not necessarily be that a project scores well on some of the more quantitative questions, but the qualitative questions that may rise to the top as well.
Okay, that's good to hear, because when I look at this, just basically, it's just like, well, what do you mean we have to have so many crashes before it becomes important? I don't want any crashes. So thank you.
Yeah, we're doing our best to provide areas in the application where the narrative will be able to address some of those places where we aren't able to have quantitative data.
Any other questions or comments? I really appreciate you bringing that up, Director Harvey. And I feel like there has to be an opportunity to have a balance between areas that we know are really dangerous hotspots where we've had repeated, fatalities and crashes, and also trying to say, hey, this looks like very much like a potential future hotspot. And so how do we avoid that before someone, gets killed there? So appreciate you bringing that up. Are there any comments from members of the public in person on this item, which is 5.4? Seeing none, is there anyone online?
I do not see anyone online wishing to speak. Chair Hopkins.
All right. With that, any further comments from my colleagues? Great work and appreciate the presentation. With that, it is budget day, or at least preliminary budget day. So I will invite Tanya up to kick it off with the RCPA budget.
Good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and directors. Wait a moment for the presentation to be loaded. Too excited to get started. So. All right. So with that, I am here to begin our budget presentation for you today. And all right. As As Chair Hopkins mentioned, I'm here to cover the RCPA portion, but before I do that, just a quick reminder that by June of each year, the SCTA RCPA must adopt 5 preliminary budgets for operations to continue into our new fiscal year. The 5 budgets that we'll share with you today cover the RCPA, the Transportation Fund for Clean Air, or TFCA program, Measure M, Go Sonoma, and the SCTA General Operation. So I'll start with the RCPA, and then I will pass it off to my colleagues to cover the remaining budgets.
Great. And just to briefly interrupt, I think we'll just hold questions to the end. So we'll kind of seamlessly transition and then we'll ask questions at the end. Thanks.
So for RCPA, we were formed in 2009 through state legislation. All RCPA staff are employees of SCTA. Over 3/4 of our revenue and about half of our funded positions are from the BayREN program, or Bay Area Regional Energy Network. And we are continuing to struggle to find a sustainable funding source for our climate action. Our funding is limited, and as you'll see in the budget proposed for you today, our fund balance continues to be negatively impacted by this lack of sustainable funding. So I'll start out with the revenue side of the equation. And so highlighting our changes in FY 25-26 that are proposed to you here today. Overall, our revenues are increasing by 20%, and this is primarily due to BayREN. So as shown in the chart on this slide, BayREN provides about 83% of our overall revenue, with the balance of 17% coming from our local member contributions and a small amount of grant funding. Within BayREN, so that kind of the orange and the blue, the majority of the BayREN funding is for the Water Upgrade Save program, with about 18% of that water upgrades funding RCPA staff and the remaining 82% for consultants to implement the program. We currently have 2 utilities embedded in the program, the cities of Sebastopol and Cloverdale has recently communicated to us their intention to lead the program. So we have a real focus in the year ahead on enrolling additional utilities. And in 24-25, we did not add any new utilities and did not have any new projects in the program. So the $544,000 increase in revenue is actually a budget rollover for BayREN due to the lack of utility enrollment in 24-25. We didn't expend those funds. And so we are proposing to roll those over to this new fiscal year for utility enrollment. And we are at a place with the program where we must enroll new utilities in the new fiscal year in order for the program to remain viable. The other increases in revenue that are included in our budget are a $15,000 budget rollover from this current fiscal year for the Sonoma County EV charging plan. And this is a partnership between the RCPA, the County of Sonoma, and Latino service providers to develop a countywide EV charging plan. And we thought originally the project would start up in this current fiscal year, and it has been delayed due to the time it's taken to identify consultants for the project. And so that's the reason for the budget rollover. And then lastly, just to highlight an increase in the local contributions, so the member contributions that fund that 17% of our overall budget. And so we are proposing a 3% increase, or roughly $12,000 in local contributions for that piece. So that covers the revenue side of the equation. In terms of our expenditures changes proposed, there's an overall 19% increase in expenditures. And this really mirrors in many ways the revenue side of the picture. The majority of that is a $500,000 budget rollover for water upgrade safe consultant services to support the utility enrollment in the new fiscal year. And then there is a staff time increase due to the 5% COLA, cost of living increase, and RCPA's share of a new position, which you will hear about later in the presentation. So with that, staff's recommendation to the board is to adopt the FY 25-26 RCPA preliminary budget. And with that, I would like to introduce David, who will present the TFCA, Measure M, and Go Sonoma budgets to you.
Thank you, Tanya. So good afternoon again, Chair and Directors. So the first budget I'll be describing is the Transportation Fund for Clean Air. Previously in your consent calendar, you adopted the fiscal year 25-26 program projects. Item 4.3 on our agenda. So this is the funding program received from the Air District. That is for 40% of the funds they receive from DMV for a special vehicle registration fee. Of that 6.5, 6.25% of funds we use for our administration cost. These funds are available for use in all the jurisdictions that are in their districts, so everything south of Windsor essentially. So changes in fiscal 25-26, we had a 3% increase in the revenue we received from the DMV. We have rollovers and projects that are completely under budget, and so there's a little bit of a bump. We normally receive about $600,000 to $650,000 annually, and we have about $700,000 this year's budget. Expenses are a little bit down from previous fiscal years. Previously, we presented these numbers to you for the budget presentation. We had a little complicated thing where we have a rollover, but I am for expenditures and then also just general new expenditures. We'll put them all together, make it compare over time. So this is showing a 7% decrease compared to last fiscal year. And then we also have about a $6,000 decrease in admin cost due to that 6.25% cap and how it's calculated by years. With that, we recommend you adopt the fiscal 25-26 TFC from our budget. Move on next to Measure M budget. So Measure M is the voter approved sales tax for Sonoma County. It expired on March 31st this year and was replaced by the Ghost sales tax, which the voters passed back in 2020. Current revenue projections are at 97% of the original estimate from 2004. We'll have a confirmation on that number once we receive the final 2 months worth of payments from the filing tax administration later this year. So just to give you some history on the revenue for Measure M. Measure M revenue collection peaked in fiscal year 23 at $32.6 million. With the inflation over the last few years, things come down. And at fiscal year 25, this current fiscal year, we're estimated at -12%. I should note that fiscal year 25 only includes 3 quarters of Measure M revenue, as the 4th quarter is now solely Sonoma. So you can see on the chart here, there's no more sales tax revenue for Measure M. However, we also have some other revenue that we're describing next slide. Here's the pie chart for Measure M. 40% of the funds went towards Highway 101, 10% for bus transit operation, 5% for smart rail for startup for getting the system going, 4% for bicycle and pedestrian projects, 1% for administration of the sales tax, 20% for local street rehabilitation directly to the city and county, and then also 20% for local street projects for major projects such as changes at Airport Way and at Full Road Highway Couple. Okay, so on the revenue side, while we don't have any more sales tax revenue, we do have some interest earnings. We're assuming about $170,000 interest earnings based on the revenue we have on hand. And then also we pass through a number of different funding sources through Measure M, including Regional Management 3 for improvements to Highway 101, and also our federal state process school group. So there's about $2.1 million in revenue still coming through Measure M in this budget, but that's since the revenue on Measure M sales taxes ended, we're down 91% compared to last fiscal year. On the expenditure side, we still have a number of projects that are going on, but we do have a large decrease in contributions to active governments in this budget category as the Measure M local streets and roads and local bus transit or LSR and LBT programs have ended. We also have continued expenditures in local street projects with delivery of curb avenue interchange, and we anticipate other projects going on in 2 years with Measure M. So overall, we have 51% decrease in expenditures next fiscal year. With that, we recommend that you adopt the Measure M budget, and I'll go on to the next Sonoma, which is highly related to Measure M. So as I mentioned earlier, Sonoma was passed by the voters in 2020. It's extending Measure M with new Sonoma sales tax from April 1st of this year to March 31st of 2045. Last year, the board approved the strategic implementation plan for Measure M's new name, Sonoma, and now we're working on the implementation of that. So Sonoma has a much different pie chart than Measure M had. There's no more 101 program and there's no direct to rail program anymore. Now we have 38% of the funds going to the Sonoma Roads program, which is about double the amount of funds that were previously given to the jurisdiction for local street and road repair. We have 12% of the funds that go to build bikeways and pathways, 27% of the funds go to move traffic and improve safety, and then finally 23% go to Sonoma Transit. It's a large increase for transit as well. Of those, there's many different sub-programs. On Sonoma Transit, we have 18% for transit operations, 3% to SCTCA for first and last mile programs, and also 2% to fare-free programs for the bus transit operators. We also have under the Build Pathways and Pathways program, a 1% community benefit programs for education encouragement, such as Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero, along with 11% of funds for competitive projects. On MTIS, or Move Traffic Improved Safety, we have 20%, 27% of the funds, and for both MTIS and Build Pathways and Pathways, we use 5% of the funds for capacity increasing to help jurisdictions with grant applications, doing public engagement, and preparing technical analysis to try to manage those similar further and external state and federal dollars. Just to give you an update, we have a large update in your packet showing kind of the economic conditions that have been happening in the last few months. This is a table from our textbook zone HDL showing the fourth quarter of 2024 compared to the fourth quarter of 2023. So things are down a little bit. Really, the continued inflation and consider an uncertainty of what the economy is doing from a daily basis is really driven down a lot of expenditures that consumers would be doing otherwise. So there's lots less construction happening on right now. People are buying less goods and waiting to do investments such as new cars and remodels. Looking at the revenue estimate going forward, as I mentioned earlier, we have a 1% decrease in sales tax for this current fiscal year. Next fiscal year, we're assuming about 0.1% growth rate before we return to normal growth rates in fiscal 27 to 2.8%. The historic growth rate for Measure M is about 2.8 to 3.1%. So we're trying to get back to that number again. As I mentioned earlier, we only had 1 quarter of revenue for Ghost Sonoma this current fiscal year. Almost a 3 times jump for next fiscal year. Revenue highlights, as I mentioned earlier, we have the flat sales tax, but we're assuming 31.4 million revenue for fiscal year 26. On the expenditure side, we have a big jump in expenditures. This current fiscal year, we had kind of a startup of Ghost Sonoma programs, a few projects such as the City County's Sidewalk Gap Closure Project, which was the first Ghost Sonoma project to start construction, started happening, but we had a couple others that have been delayed. We do have a lot of projects that will be going online this coming fiscal year, and we'll also start movements for projects, and then also the Ghost Sonoma Roads program and the Ghost Sonoma Transit program. So there'll be a lot of funds going out to our local agencies. We'll also have on the internal side of 1.1 million for consultant services for our commuter programs, state programs, and also capacity building for grant applications. And we'll be using about $500,000 for staff time to administer those programs and capacity. With that, we recommend we adopt the fiscal year 25-26 Ghost Sonoma budget, and I'll turn it over to Brenton for the SCTCA budget.
All right, hello. Controlling of this. Hello, I am Brenton Hare. I'm the Fiscal and Administrative Analyst for the SCTCA, and I'm here to present the preliminary budget for the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. The SCTA was created by ordinance in 1990, and it employs all 17 of the full-time staff that work for the combined office, and it's in manageable financial shape. For our first slide, we are going to look at the proposed org chart for the organization. This is similar to the previous year's org charts, except for the addition in the center left column of the proposed community engagement officer. This is a new position that we're proposing, and it is related to the need for the Ghost Sonoma education and encouragement programs, as well as joint transit and climate community engagement work that we're trying to focus on. The goal for this position is to eventually promote Ross into that new spot, leaving his senior marketing specialist position vacant. And the clerk of the board position, which was recently vacated and is being recruited now, that position will recruit to this new community engagement officer. All right, and we'll move on to revenue for the SCTCA. Revenues are in good shape compared to prior year. We are predicting and budgeting for an increase in total revenue of 33%. Revenues for the SCTA are split between 2 categories. We have revenues, which are grants, contracts, things like that, and then reimbursements, which are reimbursements from the other departments or the other funds, Measure M, Ghost Sonoma, and RCPA for SCTA employee staff time. So for revenue in 25-26, we are predicting budgeting a $115,000 increase from labor from Go Sonoma, $2 million in new funding from Regional Measure 3 related to long-term work on Highway 37, and $673,000 in increased federal grants from the Safe Streets and Roads for All 2024 program. And finally, a $1.4 million increase in rate mitigation funding due to the new county agreement with rate. All right, for expenditures in 25-26, we are budgeting for a 32% increase of approximately $3.2 million. And that's largely due to the labor increase of $434,000. And that's primarily the addition of the community engagement officer, as well as a proposed 5% staff-wide COLA. And this is for employee engagement, retention, and hiring. Since the last time the SCTA conducted or provided a staff COLA, the County of Sonoma has provided 2 4% COLAs. So this is to stay in line with the County of Sonoma. And we are also budgeting for an increase of consultant services of $1.9 million, again, due to consulting work needed for the Highway 37 long-term work. All right, and with that, we ask that the board adopt the fiscal year 25-26 SCTA preliminary budget. And that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll bring it back to my colleagues for any questions. Director Harvey.
On the RCPA budget, I know we had to again use fund balance, and the fund balance will be drawn down to a very low level by next year and won't be enough to cover this difference again. What are we doing to kind of balance that budget? Because next year we won't be able to cover it with fund balance.
Great question. So this is one of many reasons that we're looking closely at the climate bond as a way to bring in additional revenue. I would say, however, that is not sustainable source of funding like a sales tax or other type of ongoing mechanism. So it is something that we are closely watching and also looking at ways that through our closer integration with SCTA as part of our new integrated organization, that there are opportunities for staff to work more on transportation related projects. So we're looking at really having to keep the RCPA portion of our work, very lean and look at other ways that we can provide funding for staff. And then obviously that makes our BayREN participation and role so very critical because it is such a big portion of our budget.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from my colleagues?
Just a comment.
Director Giudice.
Be nice. I'm really excited about getting Highway 101 in the rearview mirror, so to speak.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun. It's a windfall.
Are there any comments from members of the public on this item in person? Seeing none, is there anyone online?
I do not see anyone online wishing to speak, Chair Hopkins.
With that, I will bring that back for a potential motion.
So moved.
And do we have a second on that? Second from Director Harvey. Motion from Director Giudice. With that, could we please have a roll call vote on item 5.5?
All right. Director Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Harvey,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Hinton,
Yes.
Director or Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Director Lands,
Aye.
Director Leap,
Yes.
Director Farrar Rivas,
Aye.
Director Okrepke,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
and Chair Hopkins.
Yes. That motion carries unanimously. And with that, thank you all so much for the presentation. And we'll move on to item 5.6, which is our branding. So I will hand it over to James for this one.
Given the late hour, I'm going to do a speed round for the first few slides that will be sent out to the entire board. I'd love to talk with any of you about the history of our organization, who our members are, who our partners are, the timeline for SCTA and the things that we've done, the successes we've had on the RCPA side of the house. We are two agencies, one staff, one board. With that being said, to better align all of our staff on both climate and transportation action, the board approved the new brand name of Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities in February to have a new brand that goes along with that new name. I'm going to pass it to Ross to just talk about our new logo and brand here on the screen in front of you.
Thank you, James. After the new name was selected, we started the process to find an appropriate visual to represent the combined climate and transportation goals. So we worked with a local designer. Staff and management were presented options, and after 3 rounds of internal voting, a design was chosen. So special care was taken to equally emphasize transportation and climate in the wording. Alternate versions for various design applications can be seen to the right, and an updated SCTCA brand guide will be created to ensure consistency. So the next step is to continue with a full organizational rebrand, and that'll involve updating the name and branding on all materials in print and digital.
All right. And so in conclusion, the priorities don't change. This is more the way staff works together and integrates. Our priorities are still in accordance with the overall work plan that the board approved earlier this year, where we're focused on regional planning, that SCTCA funding program cycle 2, our multi-jurisdictional grants, and identifying ways to leverage the climate bond going forward. With that, we would ask the board's approval of our new SCTCA brand. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I'll bring it back for any questions. Seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this item in person? Seeing none, how about online?
I do not see anyone online wishing to comment, Chair Hopkins.
All right, does anyone want to make a lightning fast motion on this one? All right, great. Second, okay, all right, can we get so it was a
sorry, who
motion
is
from
the
Director
second?
Giudice, second tie between Director Cater Thompson and Harvey. Okay, let's do Director Cater Thompson because you can get it in before she splits.
Okay.
She has to get to a budget meeting. So if we could do a quick roll call, that would be great. And maybe you could call her first so she can leave.
I certainly will. Director Cater Thompson.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, Director Corsi. Director Harvey.
Yes.
Director Giudice. Director Hinton.
Absent.
Absent. Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Director Lance.
Aye.
Director Leap. Director Farrar Rivas.
Yes.
Director Okrepke.
Aye.
Director Rabbit. And Chair Hopkins.
Yes. And that motion carries. And so that will bring us to the reports and announcements. Should we start with the executive committee report?
So our executive committee met today to discuss our current board agenda, as well as checking in with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's new chair, which will be invited to a future executive committee. We discussed the Marin Sonoma Coordinated Transit Service, known as Mascots, and the future implementation of that in 2026. We discussed potential participation in Conference of Parties 30 down in Brazil and future board items. That concludes my executive committee report.
Great. Any regional agency reports to report out on? All right, going once, going twice. And we have the advisory committee's agendas as part of our agenda packet today. And then moving on to SCTA. Actually, it still says SCTA RCPA activities report, but I feel like we need to update the standard agenda now to the SCTCA activities report. So we'll start with Ross, marketing and communication. And also apparently doing everything Drew did in addition to his real job.
Not quite as well. Not quite as well. Very briefly, I just want to highlight a few things. There was a fair amount of tabling countywide, including the Earth Day events in Santa Rosa and Windsor, as well as the Petaluma Future Fest and Expo. We also attended the Forestville Fix-It Fair. And in all those, we promoted a number of programs, including Redwood Bike Share, Comprehensive Transportation Plan, as well as our commute programs and Emergency Ride Home. Upcoming events, Bike to Work Day, that's the big one. So Thursday, May 15th, We'll have energizer stations. Our staff will be partnering with City of Santa Rosa. We'll be at the it's the Santa Rosa Creek Trail. We'll be out there tabling and giving out goodies. Other things, the branding work, you saw that. And then just very briefly, a note that we're starting to work with consultants, launching a webpage and fact sheet on the Lakeville Multimodal Improvement Plan. So you'll hear about more of that as we go forward, but that's the outreach side of that is a fact sheet and a webpage, which is up. So please let me know if you have any questions regarding these or any other communications topics. Actually, I will add one thing. There is a new Redwood Bike Share promotion, which we're promoting. The monthly membership, which gives you a free 30-minute ride every day, is now $5, which is normally the equity price, but everyone can get that using the code RIDEREDWOOD. So passing that along. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Wonderful. Any questions for Ross? Seeing none, I think BC is up next. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it. And thank you for everything that you are doing to make the meetings happen. Also, really appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Board, Madam Chair. BC CAPS, Climate Programs Manager here with SCTCA. Wanted to just give a couple of other highlights from our climate change work the last month. Personally, I've been spending a fair amount of time working on the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan. A few steps that we've taken on that. We had a third meeting of our staff advisory group. We also, during that process, finalized our recommended priority areas and recommended actions that will be highlighted in that report. That was reviewed by our Climate Action Advisory Committee this past Friday. And we prepared review packets that were sent out to a number of members of what we're calling technical reviewers, who were past members of our Climate Protection Initiative Buildings Committee from about a year and a half ago. And a number of review packets also went out for an equity review from a number of community-based organization contacts. And then from those equity reviewers, we held 2 sessions last week online to get kind of some feedback on the proposed actions in the plan and to get basically some real world scenarios, talk through things. So we had 2 sessions last week, 1 more this week, and a number of additional sets of comments that are expected to come in by the end of the week this Friday. So our plan on that is we will be incorporating all of this review and feedback into our latest version and be coming back to the board later on this summer with a full review of that report for your kind of review and approval. Secondarily, wanted to highlight the work that I've been doing or that we've been doing as a team in conjunction with the SCTA, the data analyst, Adam Garcia, working on our climate dashboard and continuing to upgrade that with some additional data having to do with climate and resilience indicators. So we met with staff from Sonoma Water and staff from Zero Waste Sonoma recently and talked with both of those organizations about kind of data sources that are available that we could use to integrate into that dashboard. So working with Adam on that and also working on a number of design updates to integrate that will be presented when that new data is integrated into the board. So again, we hope to present that later on this summer or early fall. In conjunction with that, I wanted to mention every couple of years, RCPA or the SCTCA conducts a community-wide greenhouse gas inventory. And we are looking at investigating. There's new software that's come available through ICLEI, through their labeling as ClearPath 2.0. We're investigating that as an option for our work, and I'm in conversation with several local jurisdictions about how that software could also be used for local greenhouse gas inventories that are done at the jurisdictional level. Finally, to wrap up, a couple of highlights on our work with the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. And as Tanya mentioned, as part of the budget discussion, that is kind of a very, very much important bulk of work for us to do. So one of the couple of highlights there, on the single-family residential program. That program is being redesigned. There was a meeting just this past month, basically presenting that redesign to staff. And that launch is expected for August of later this summer, that new redesigned program for single-family homeowners would be rolled out. And then on work around multi-upgrades, energy efficiency upgrades as part of multifamily buildings, there's continued research, continued engagement and recruitment of building owners, following up on a workshop that was held on at the end of March. That was a rather successful workshop for doing outreach to multifamily building owners. And the last thing I wanted to mention, following up on Ross, I wanted to encourage everybody this week to either ride your bike on Thursday, or if you just have a chance to get out and about anytime in the next few days, just to dust off the old wheels. So thank you very much.
Yes, I am super excited for Bike to Work weekend day. So with that, I think Chris is up next. Any questions? Seeing none? All right, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Chair Hopkins. Good afternoon, directors. So let's start out with Bike to School Day, which was May 7th. So a lot of activities were associated with that. We contract with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition to administer the Safe Routes to School program. So a lot of activities happening in that area across the county every month. So we hope to have a representative from Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition here later this summer to give a full report on what's going on. So lots of great pictures and activities going on there. So moving on to Redwood Bike Share, rides are up after a slower winter. So we're happy to see that happening. The Alicia Park Hub in Roanoke Park has seen the most rides this quarter. So we'll be watching that going forward. The program's also been showcased at events across the county. Ross mentioned a lot of the tabling that's happening. So a lot of events and the bikes out in the community. And we also partnered with the Bicycle Coalition to hold intro to bike share classes to get people acclimated to use the application and use those bikes. So moving on to transit integration, we're in the second phase of website work. We started out working on the Santa Rosa City Bus website, so working on the look and feel of that. And now we're focused on the Sonoma County Transit and Petaluma Transit website. So proceeding there. And James mentioned the mascots effort. So we're continuing to work on local bus operations and regional operations in the Highway 101 corridor as part of that project. So more on that soon. So over to our VMT mitigation program, we're working with our consultants, fair and peers on that, and also local agency staff. We have a TAC guiding that project. We've completed stakeholder outreach as part of that program and are moving into our demonstration phase of that project. So we'll be actually walking through how the process would work, how developers or lead agencies would interact with that program, and we'll have some draft recommendations ready later this summer. So your local staff will be seeing that very soon, and we'll be bringing back those draft recommendations to you in July. So more on that soon. On mapping and data, Adam Garcia is supporting the active transportation plan implementation mapping and safety project implementation. There's been a lot of field data collection going on, finding out where people are walking and biking and supporting different project work. So he's also working on potential improvements to our Vision Zero data dashboard that's looking at existing crash locations. Moving on to the active transportation plan. So we're continuing to support the county in finalizing their ATP. The draft was presented to the Sonoma County Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee last month, and it'll be going to Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors along with a general plan amendment sometime later this year. So that's progressing. Onto our community-based transportation plans. We wrapped up our phase 1 outreach last month for the Central Roanoke Park and South Santa Rosa Avenue CBTPs. So the next bit of work is taking all of that feedback and information and coming up with a list of project improvements that we'll take back out to the community to help prioritize for each of those areas in the community. Onto the comprehensive transportation plan, we're continuing to receive feedback on transportation priorities and concerns in the county. So a lot of the outreach we're doing out in the community, we're gathering feedback about what's important to people as they move around in our county. So we're also working on finalizing the list of transportation projects that was mentioned as part of the SCTCA funding program. So we released the draft a number of months ago, received feedback on that, and we have it in a good enough place that we've posted it online. So we have a sortable and filterable list of projects up on the website that you can view and look at now. So this summer, we'll continue to work on developing content for the plan and evaluating plan performance. So moving to the strategic transportation demand management plan, Dana and staff have been working with our consultants from STEER to develop the draft plan, which will help prioritize implementation of TDM measures and first last mile programs in Sonoma County. So they developed an engagement summary and scored some different TDM strategies and are reviewing an administrative draft of that plan right now. And that draft will be going out to our committees this month and will be coming to you this summer. And then wrapping up with the transit-oriented communities policy, we continue to work with the planners and public works representatives from each of your jurisdictions, the PAC and TAC, to coordinate work on the TOC policy. And we held a joint workshop with the planners, engineers, and public works representatives last month, talked about the draft evaluation criteria, policy compliance, potential funding impacts, and technical assistance for meeting those criteria. So a lot of work going on there. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up and happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions? Seeing none, I think Shauna's next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Just a couple of projects to keep you updated on. The first is the 116-121 intersection. The median work is completed and the center median, so the roundabout is actually painted and active. And work will focus on the northwest quadrant for the next couple of months until they can move on back over to the northeast quadrant. That's a little bit wet right now, so they're focusing on the northwest quadrant. On the Hearn Avenue interchange, we are anticipating that the traffic switch to the new bridge will happen in early June, and then both directions will be shifted over to the new bridge while they demolish the old bridge and then build the second half. So that's coming up. Be ready for that. Also wanted to make sure you were aware that the CTC is expected to announce staff recommendations for the competitive programs of SB1 on June 6th. And I think that's everything. Oh, on 121 8th Street East, we are, the consultant has begun obtaining permissions to enter with the various property owners, and we are beginning to start those technical studies that will support the environmental compliance document. With that, I would answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Director Kelly, Vice Chair Kelly.
Thank you. Just a quick one. You just said about the CTC announcement for the SB1 funds on June 6th. Do we have specific projects that we're waiting to hear back on? And if it's like too much of a deep dive, we don't have to answer now.
Yeah, thank you, Director Kelly. So the projects we're primarily focused on is MTC's application for phase 2 of the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project on Highway 37. That would be the eastbound widening between Tubbs Island, east of 121 and Mare Island. And then the other project that we are focused on as well is the extension of SMART to Healdsburg. They have applied for some SB1 funds for that, and extension to Guysville as part of that application as well. And then they're also, this town of Windsor has applied for a few $1 million for completing the funding package for the downtown undercrossing bicycle and pedestrian project. So those are the 3 projects we're primarily focused on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Shauna. And now I will ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment on all of those items 6.4.1 through 6.4.4. Seeing none, Ross, anyone online?
I do not see anyone online.
All right, and that will take us to announcements. Anyone have any announcements that they would like to share? All right, and with that, go for it. Director Ferrari-Vis?
No.
Oh, no, you don't? You're good. I was like, I have the gavel ready to go. All right, Director Kelly.
I have one quick one, sorry. The Smart Station ribbon cutting for Windsor is going to take place on Friday. I believe it's June 13th at this time, and all SCTCA board members are invited to attend. As you all know, this is a major milestone for North County and our friends in Windsor and beyond. So that takes place on June 13th, which is a Friday, and I'll make sure staff has the info to send it out to everybody. But safe.
Great. And then I think Director Corsi is maybe going to make that same announcement. So so it's all covered. Okay.
Oh,
Wonderful.
sorry, I didn't know.
No. He raised his hand after he saw you raise your hand, actually, and then you covered it. So we're all good. Thank you so much. And with that, we are adjourned. Everyone have a good evening.